Chapter 9. Good shall prevail on the earth. Footnote: the whole of Chapter 9 and the first few paragraphs of Chapter 10 are told directly in Anastasia's words. In one of the Russian domains lived a happy family, a husband, wife, and 2 children, a boy, Konstantin, who was 8, and a little 5-year-old girl named Dasha. Footnote: the diminutive form of the name Daria. Family and friends might call her Dashenka, or, indicating a momentary negative emotion, Dashka. Konstantin may be known informally as Kostya or Katenka. They could in turn address their parents as Mamushka and Papushka. End footnote. Their father was considered one of the most talented computer programmers in Russia. His study at home contained several state-of-the-art computers on which he compiled programs for a government military agency. Sometimes he would linger at his computers well into the evening hours, completely absorbed in his work. Other members of the family, accustomed to gathering in the evenings, headed for his study, where each busied themselves with their own activities. The wife sat in a comfortable armchair and sewed. Their son read or drew sketches of the landscape of the new settlements. Only 5-year-old Dasha would not always find herself an activity to her liking, in which case she would curl up in a chair with a good view of everyone else, and spend a long time carefully observing each member of the family. Occasionally she would close her eyes, and her face would show a whole range of emotions. On what seemed to be a fairly routine evening, the family had gathered in the father's study as usual, each one busy in their own way. The study door was open, which meant that they could hear the cuckooing of an old-fashioned mechanical cuckoo clock on the wall of the children's room next door. Usually it would sound off only during the daytime hours, but now it was already evening. So when the father glanced up from his work and stared at the door, while the other family members gave an astonished look in the same direction, all except for little Dasha, who simply sat in her armchair, her eyes closed, apparently oblivious to everything. A smile, first barely noticeable, then quite evident, crept across her lips. All at once the clock cuckooed a second time, as though someone standing in the children's room had moved the hands forward to announce the next hour. Ivan Nikiphorovich, as the father of the household was called, turned his swivel chair in his son's direction and said, "Kostya, please go see if you can fix the clock, or at least stop it. We've had it a long time, that gift of grandfather's. Strange how it got broken like that. Strange. See if you can do something about it, Kostya." Footnote: Nikiphorovich, a patronymic derived from Ivan's father's first name, Nikifor. The children were always obedient, not out of fear of punishment. In fact, they were never punished. Kostya and Dasha loved and respected their parents. They got the highest pleasure out of doing something together or carrying out their parents' wishes. Upon hearing his father's request, Kostya at once rose up from his seat, but, to his mother's and father's surprise, did not head for the children's room. Instead, he just stood and stared at his younger sister sitting in the armchair with her eyes closed. Then, once again, they heard a cuckooing from the next room. But Kostya still stood there and stared, his eyes fixed on his sister. Galina, their mother, looked concernedly at her son, who remained rooted to the spot. All at once she got up and cried out in fright, "Kostya! Kostya, what is the matter with you?" The 8-year-old boy turned to his mother, wondering what she was frightened about, and replied, "Everything is fine with me, Mama. I wanted to do as Papa asked, but I can't." "Why not? Are you unable to move? You're unable to go to your room?" "I can move," replied Kostya, waving his arms about and stamping his feet on the spot to prove it. "But there's no point in my going to our room. She's here, and she's stronger." "Who is here? Who is stronger?" Mother started getting more and more upset. Dasha, Kostya replied, pointing to his younger sister sitting in the armchair, her eyes closed and with a smile on her face. She's the one who's been moving the hands forward. I tried to put them back in place, but I can't do it when she... What are you talking about, Kostyenka? Mother interrupted. You and Dashenka are both here with us. I can see you. How can you two be here at the same time move the clock hands in the other room? Yes, we're here, answered Kostya, but our thoughts are in the other room where the clock is. Only her thought is stronger. That's why the clock keeps cuckooing. Her thought is speeding up the hands. She's been playing a lot of tricks like that lately. I told her not to. I knew it might upset you, but Dasha doesn't care. All she has to do is to fall into a state of contemplation, and she starts thinking up something. What is Dasha contemplating on? Ivan Nikiforovich broke into the conversation. And Kostya, why didn't you say anything about this earlier? You yourself can see how she's contemplating. The clock hands aren't important. She's just amusing herself. I can move the hands too when nobody's interfering, only I can't contemplate like Dasha. When she's in a state of contemplation like that, there's no way anyone can counteract her thought. What is she contemplating on? Do you know, Kostya? Sorry, why don't you ask her yourself? I'll stop her contemplation before she thinks up anything else. Kostya went over to the chair his sister was sitting in and said distinctly in a louder than normal voice, Dasha, stop thinking. If you don't stop, I shan't speak to you for a whole day. Besides, you frightened Mama. With a flutter of her eyelashes, the little girl surveyed everyone present in the room with an observing glance and, as though literally waking up, jumped up from her chair and hung her head apologetically. The cuckooing stopped, and for a while the study was enveloped in complete silence, a silence eventually broken by little Dasha's apologizing voice. She raised her head, looked at her Mama and Papa with her sparkling, tender eyes, and said, Mamoshka, Papushka, forgive me for frightening you, but I had to. I just had to finish thinking it through, this thought I had. Now I can't help but think it through. I'll be thinking it through tomorrow, too, when I've had a rest. The girl's lips trembled, and it seemed as though she were about to break into tears, but she continued. Kostya, you can refuse to talk to me if you like, but I will go on contemplating all the same until I think it through. Come to me, daughter dear, said Ivan Nikiforovich, trying to act restrained. He held out his arms to his daughter, ready to embrace her. Dasha rushed forward toward her father, jumped up on his knees and put her little arms around his neck, pressed her cheek briefly against his, and then jumped down and stood beside him, bending her head down to him. Ivan Nikiforovich, for some reason, had a hard time hiding his emotion. He began telling his daughter, Don't worry, Dashenka. Mama will no longer get frightened when you contemplate. Just tell us what you're thinking about. What is so important to think through, and why do the clock hands move forward and so fast when you're thinking? You see, Papushka, I want to make everything that's nice even bigger in time, and everything that's bad tiny and unnoticeable. Or even, I want to think it through so that the hands skip over the bad things and they aren't there anymore. But what is nice and what is bad doesn't depend on the clock hands, Dashenka. It doesn't depend on the hands, Papushka, I realize that, but I move them along so that I can feel the time. The cuckoo counts off the speed of my thinking because I have to get it done in time. That's why I move the hands. How do you do that, Dashenka? It's simple. I picture the hands of the clock out of the corner of my thought, then I think they should go faster, and they go faster when I start thinking fast. What do you want to achieve, dear daughter, by speeding up time? What don't you like about the present time? I like it. I realize now that time isn't to blame. It's people themselves who spoil their time. You, Papushka, are so often at your computer. Then you go away for a long time. You, Poposhka, spoil the time when you go away. Me? Spoil it? How so? We have a good time when we're all together. When we're together, we have very good minutes, and hours, and even days. Everything around is joyful. Do you remember, Poposhka, when the apple tree began to bloom just a little bit? You and Mama saw the first buds, and you took Mama into your arms and twirled around. And Mamoshka laughed so brightly that everything around was joyful with us. The leaves on the trees and the little birds, too. And I didn't feel sore at all about your twirling Mama around in your arms instead of me, 'cause I love Mamoshka very much. I was so happy with that time, just like everyone else. But then a different time came. I realize now that it was you, Poposhka, who made it different. You went away from us for a very long time. Baby apples had even begun to appear on the apple tree. But still, you didn't come home. And Mamoshka went to the apple tree and stood there all by herself. But there was nobody there to twirl her around, and she didn't laugh brightly. And nothing around had anything to be joyful about. And Mamoshka has quite a different smile on her face when you're not around. It's a sad smile. And that is a bad time. Dasha spoke quickly and excitedly. All at once she seemed to choke on something inside her, and then burst out. You shouldn't make it bad when it is good. Time, Poposhka. Dasha, you're right about one thing, of course. But you don't know everything about the times we're all in. The times we live in. Ivan Nikiforovich spoke disconnectedly. He was feeling tense. Somehow he needed to explain how necessary it was for him to go away, to explain it in such a way that his little daughter could understand. Finding no better alternative, he began telling her about his work, showing her rocket models and schematics on the computer. You see, Dashenka, of course, it's good for us here, and it's good for those who live in our neighborhood too. But there are other places, other countries in the world, and they've got a lot of weapons, all sorts of them, to protect our splendid garden and all the gardens and houses of your friends. Sometimes Papa has to go away. Our country must have a lot of up-to-date weapons to defend itself. But recently, Dashenka, you see, recently in another country, not ours, they came up with a new kind of weapon. For the time being, it is stronger than ours. Look here on the screen, Dashenka. And Ivan Nikiforovich gave a tap on the keyboard, and the image of a strange kind of missile appeared on the screen. Look, Dashenka, this is a large missile, and it holds 56 smaller missiles. The large rocket takes off at man's command and heads for its assigned target to destroy everything living there. This missile is very hard to shoot down. When any object approaches it, an onboard computer kicks in and sends out one of the smaller missiles to destroy the object. The smaller missiles can travel faster than the big one, since when they're launched, they can use the inertia speed of the larger missile. To shoot down just one such monster, we need to send 57 missiles out against it. The country producing this so-called cassette missile has only 3 working models at the moment. They have been carefully concealed in various places, in shafts deep underground, but it only takes a single radio-transmitted command to launch them. A small group of terrorists are already blackmailing a number of countries, threatening to wreak havoc on them. So you see, Dashenka, I have to decode the program of the cassette missile's onboard computer. Ivan Nikiforovich got up and walked around the room. He continued talking rapidly, getting more and more absorbed in his thoughts about the program, seeming oblivious to his little girl standing beside the computer. Ivan Nikiforovich quickly went over to the monitor showing the external image of the missile, gave a tap on the keyboard, and the screen showed a schematic of the missile's fuel supply system, then one of the targeting radar devices, and then once more an overall image. Even as he was switching the screen images, Ivan Nikiforovich was no longer paying attention to his dear little daughter. He kept reasoning aloud. They've obviously equipped each of the smaller missiles with a targeting radar device. Of course, they would apply it to every single one, but there can't be any difference in the programs. The programs have to be identical. All at once, one of the other computers emitted an alarm sound, demanding immediate attention. Ivan Nikiforovich quickly turned to the respective monitor and froze in his seat. The screen showed a blinking message, "Emergency alert, emergency alert." Ivan Nikiforovich gave a quick tap on the keyboard, and an image of a man in a military uniform appeared on the screen. "What's happened?" Ivan Nikiforovich asked him. "3 unusual explosions have been recorded," responded the man. "A whole defense complex has been put on emergency alert. Explosions of lesser magnitude are continuing. There's been an earthquake in Africa. Nobody offered any explanations. According to international information exchange networks, all military blocs on the planet have been ordered to high alert. Still no determination where the attack originated from. The explosions are continuing, and we're trying to shed light on the situation. All personnel have been ordered to set about analyzing the situation." The officer on the screen spoke in a clipped military fashion. At the end, his voice was already betraying signs of concern. "Explosions continuing, Ivan Nikiforovich. Explosions continuing. I'm signing off." The officer's image disappeared from the screen. Ivan, I'm just going to say Ivan from now on. Ivan, however, continued to stare at the darkened monitor, intensely absorbed in thought. Slowly and pensively, he turned in the direction of his chair, where Dasha was still standing as before. All at once, an incredible conjecture made him shudder. He saw how his own little daughter, her eyes screwed up and unblinking, were staring at the screen, showing the image of the modern missile. Suddenly, her little body gave a start. Then, letting out a sigh of relief, she hit the enter button on the keyboard. When the image of the new missile appeared, she screwed up her eyes again and began staring intently at the monitor. Ivan stood as though paralyzed, incapable of budging from the spot, feverishly asking himself, though only in his thoughts, the same questions over and over. Could she have set off the explosions? Set them off by her thought because she doesn't like the bombs? Did she blow them up? Could that be true? How? He wanted to stop his daughter and called out to her, but he did not have the strength to speak very loudly and could only whisper, "Dasha, Dashenka, my dear daughter, stop it." Kostya, who had observed the whole scene, quickly got up from his seat, ran over to his sister, gave her a little pat on the bottom, and began talking at a rapid pace. "Now, Dashka, you've gone and upset Papa this time. Now I shan't speak to you for 2 whole days, one for Mama, the other for Papa. Do you hear? Do you hear what I'm saying? You're frightening them." Gradually emerging from her state of concentration, Dasha turned to her brother and let her face resume its normal appearance as she looked at him pleadingly and apologetically in the eye. Kostya noticed Dasha's eyes were filling with tears. Putting his hand on her shoulder, he spoke to her with a less severe tone than before. "Okay, I got carried away about not talking to you, but you'll have to tie your own hair ribbons in the morning. You're not so little anymore, you know." And telling her not to think about crying. He embraced her tenderly. The little girl nuzzled her face up against her brother's chest, her shoulders trembling, as she sorrowfully repeated, "I've gone and frightened them again. I'm a very naughty girl. I wanted to do the best I possibly could, but I've gone and frightened them." Galina came over to the children, squatted down beside them, and began stroking Dasha's head. The girl threw her arms around her mother's neck and sobbed quietly. "How does she do it, Kostya? How?" Ivan asked his son as he slowly came to himself. "The same way she moves the hands of the clock, Papa," replied Kostya. "But the clock is right here. And the missiles are a long way away, and their location is classified as top secret." "Papa, it doesn't matter to Dasha where they're located. All she needs is to see the outward appearance of the object." "But the explosions, in order to set them off, the circuits have to be connected. Quite a few circuits at that. There are safety mechanisms, codes. But Papa, Dasha is able to go through all the circuits until a connection is made. Before, it took her a long time to do that, maybe 15 minutes, but lately she's got it down to a minute and a half. Before? Yes, Papa, not only with missiles. That was the way we played. And she started moving the clock hands forward, and I showed her my old electric car that I used to love riding in when I was little. You see, Papa, I opened the bonnet and asked her to connect the headlamp wires together, since it was hard for me to get at them myself. She did it. When she asked to take it for a drive, I told her she was still too young and wouldn't be able to brake properly or even switch on the motor. But she kept insisting, and I gave in. I explained how to switch the motor on, but Dasha did it all her own way. I tell you, Papa, Dasha simply sat down behind the wheel and took off without switching on anything. She thought she was switching it on, but I could see that she wasn't doing anything with her hands. Rather, she was switching it on, but she did it mentally. Besides, Papa, she's made friends with microbes. They obey her. With microbes? What microbes? With the ones that are very prolific, that live everywhere, all around us and inside us. We can't see them, but they're there. You remember, Papa, over on the edge of our domain in the forest, there used to be the remains of 2 metallic posts sticking out of the ground. They belonged to an old high-voltage electric line. I remember them. What of them? They were rusty, and they rested on concrete foundations. One day, Dasha and I went mushroom picking, and she noticed these remains and said what a bad thing they were, and they weren't allowing the berries and the mushrooms to grow on that spot. And she said, "You should eat them up very, very fast." And a couple of days later, those rusty remains on the concrete foundations were gone. There was only bare earth there without grass. At least for now. The microbes had eaten the metal and the concrete. But why? Kostya, why didn't you tell me earlier about everything that was going on with Dasha? I was afraid to, Papa. Afraid of what? I was reading up on history. In the recent past, people with unusual abilities have been subject to forced isolation. I wanted to tell you and Mama about it, but I couldn't find the right words so that you would understand and believe me. Kostya, you know we will always believe you. Besides, you could show us, or rather ask Dasha to demonstrate her abilities, only with something harmless. That's not what I was afraid of, Papa. Of course she could show you. Kostya fell silent, and when he spoke again, his voice was very emotional. Papa, I love you and Mama. And even though I'm strict with Dashenka sometimes, I love her very much too. She is kind. Dasha is good to everything around her. She wouldn't even hurt a little bug, nor would they hurt her. She went up to a beehive one day, sat right down by the hive entrance and just watched how they flew. The bees crawled all over her arms and legs, and even her cheeks, and they didn't sting her. She held out her hand to the bees. They landed on it and left something there. Afterwards, she licked the palm of her hand and laughed. She's kind, Papa. Calm yourself, Kostya. Don't worry. Let's calmly examine what's going on here. We have to think about it calmly. Dasha is still a child. She's blown up several state-of-the-art missile complexes. She could start a world war. A terrible war. But even without a war, say she looked through some pictures showing not only enemy missiles, but our own. Say she started detonating all the missiles in all the countries that have them, and the world would be on the verge of a global catastrophe. Hundreds of millions of human lives would be lost. I, too, love our little Dasha, but millions. I need some advice. We must find a way out. But for now, I simply don't know. Dashenka needs to be isolated somehow. Somehow, yeah, she needs to be put to sleep for a little while. Maybe, what's the solution? How can we possibly find a way out? Papa, hold on. Maybe it's possible to eliminate all the deadly missiles she doesn't like from the whole face of the earth? Eliminate? But we'd need a multilateral agreement. from all the military blocks. Yeah, there's no way we can get one quickly, if we could get one at all. In the meantime, Ivan gave a sudden start and rushed over to his computer, where the monitor was still showed the image of a missile, which Dasha was prevented from destroying. He switched off the monitor, then sat down at his communications computer and began to transmit the following text. To headquarters, the following memo should be transmitted all at once to all military blocks and international news media. The series of missile complex explosions was caused by bacteria capable of connecting circuits. These bacteria are controllable. It will be necessary to destroy all images of any live ammunition. All images, from the most minute bullet to the most modern missile complex. The location of the explodable object is immaterial to the controller of the bacteria, who only needs to see its shape in an image. Ivan looked at Dasha, who by this time was smiling and having a lively conversation with her mama. He then added the following text. The loctation of this... The loctation... I don't know if that's meant to say location. Anyway, the loctation of the installment controlling the explosions is unknown. Finally, Ivan encoded the transmission and dispatched it to headquarters. The next morning, there was an emergency meeting of Russia's Security Council. A security detachment was posted to stand guard around the community where Ivan's domain was situated. The security personnel dressed as road repair workers so as to not draw attention to themselves. They pretended to be building a 5-kilometer-long road around the perimeter of the community, working on all 5 kilometers at once, maintaining the round-the-clock shifts. Video cameras were set up in Ivan's domain, which followed every move of Dasha's life. The video images were transmitted to a central monitoring station resembling a launch site mission control. The video monitors were manned in shifts by dozens of specialists, including psychologists and military personnel, ready to issue the required orders in case of an emergency situation. The psychologists used special communications devices to give a constant stream of recommendations to Dasha's parents on how to distract her, whatever way they could, and keep her from falling into a state of contemplation again. The Russian government put out an international statement, which many people thought strange, to the effect that in Russia there were forces capable of blowing up any type of live ammunition, no matter where it was located in the world. These forces, it said, were not entirely under the control of the Russian government, although negotiations were underway. The extraordinary nature of this statement called for some kind of confirmation to back it up. At an international council meeting, it was decided to prepare a series of unusual-looking projectiles mounted in square casings. Each country participating in the experiment took 20 such projectiles and hid them in various places on their respective territories. Why did they make the projectiles with square casings? Why couldn't they just have used ordinary ones? I asked Anastasia. They were afraid, Vladimir, that not only all the existing projectiles in the world might explode, but that all the bullets in police and army pistols might get blown up as well, wherever there were guns with live ammunition. Yes, of course. And how did the square projectile experiment go? Calling his daughter into his study, Ivan showed her a photo of a square projectile and asked her to blow them up. Dasha took a look at the photo and said, "I love you very much, Paposhka, but there's no way I can do what you ask." "Why?" asked Ivan in amazement. "Because it won't work with me." "What do you mean, Dashenka? It worked before. You blew up a whole series of modern missiles and now it won't work?" "Back then I was really upset, Paposhka. I didn't want you to go away or spend so many hours in front of your computer. When you're at your computer, you don't talk with anyone. then you're not doing anything that's interesting. But now, well, you're with us all the time. You've become very good, Paposhka, and I can't make any more explosions." At this point, Ivan realized that Dasha was unable to blow up the square projectiles because she didn't understand the purpose of the explosion and what it was for. Ivan started nervously pacing back and forth, feverishly searching for possible solutions and trying to convince Dasha to do something. But even as he was talking to his daughter, it seemed as though he were mainly reasoning it out for himself. "It won't work. No, it won't. Pity. Wars have been around for thousands of years. While wars have ended between some countries, others have begun fighting. Millions of people have perished, and they're still perishing today. Tremendous resources are being wasted on armaments, and here finally is an opportunity to stop this endless disaster scenario. But alas..." Ivan looked at Dasha sitting in the chair. His daughter's face was composed. She watched with interest as he walked about the room, constantly talking. But she was not fascinated by what he was actually saying. She did not have a full comprehension of what wars meant, what resources her father was talking about, and who was wasting them. She was immersed in her own thoughts. Why is Papa so agitated, walking back and forth amidst these computers which don't show any affection and don't give us any energy? Why doesn't he want to go out into the garden, where the trees are in bloom, and the birds are singing, and where every blade of grass and every branch of a tree caresses the whole body with something invisible? That's where Mama and Kostya are right now. I only wish Papa would finish his boring conversation and the two of us could go together to the garden. Mama and Kostya will be so happy to see us. Mama will smile. And Kostya promised yesterday he would tell me about how to touch a faraway star by putting your hand on a stone or a flower. Kostya always keeps his promises. Dashenka, are you bored of listening to me? You don't understand what I've been saying? You're thinking about something else? I've been thinking, Paposhka, why are we here and not in the garden where they're waiting for us? Ivan realized that he had to speak to his daughter sincerely and in specific terms, so he took a different tack. Dashenka, when you blew up the missiles by looking at their image, they wanted to test that ability once more, or rather show the whole world that Russia has the ability to destroy all the ammunition on the planet. Then there won't be any point in making it anymore. It would be senseless and dangerous. As for the ammunition already existing, people themselves will destroy it. A global disarmament will begin. The square projectiles were made especially so that you could show your ability without killing anyone. Blow them up, Dashenka. I can't do that anymore, Paposhka. Why? Earlier you could, and now you can't? I promised myself I would never blow up anything again. And now I've made that promise, and I don't have the ability to do it anymore. You can't? But why did you make such a promise to yourself? Kostya showed me some pictures from a book of his. Pictures of parts of bodies strewn all over after an explosion. He showed me how people are frightened by explosions, how trees fall and die from explosions. So I promised myself. Dashenka, does that mean you'll never be able to now? Just once more. Just once. You see these square projectiles? Ivan again held out the photo of a square projectile for his daughter to see. They were specially made for this experiment and are hidden away in secluded places in various countries. There are no people around, anywhere near them. Everyone's waiting to see whether they will explode or not. Blow them up, my dear daughter. That won't be breaking your promise. Nobody will perish. On the contrary. Dasha looked at the photo indifferently and calmly replied, Even if I go back on my promise, these projectiles still won't explode, Paposhka. But why not? Because you've been talking for so long, Paposhka. And when I first looked at the photo, I couldn't stand these horrible things right off. They're ugly. And now what? Dashenka, what? Please forgive me, Papushka, but when you went on talking for so long and you showed me the picture, by now they've almost been eaten up. Eaten up? What's been eaten up? Those squares. They're almost eaten up now. As soon as they realized I couldn't stand the projectiles, they got into action and began to eat them up very fast. Who are they? You know, the little ones. They're everywhere around us and inside us. They're good. Kostya calls them bacteria or microorganisms, but I've got my own name for them, a better name. I call them my little ones, my goodies. They like that name better. I play with them sometimes. People pay hardly any attention to them, but they always try to do good for everyone. When man is joyful, they feel good too, from the joyful energy. And when man is angry or hurts something living, a lot of them perish. Others rush in to replace them, but sometimes the others don't manage to replace the ones that have died, and the body becomes ill. But you are here, Dashenka, and the projectiles are far away in various countries, hidden underground. How is it possible for those little ones of yours in other lands to find out so quickly about what you desire? They tell everything to each other very fast in a chain, a lot faster than the electrons run in your computer. Computer. Communications. That's it. I'll check it all now. Video cameras have been set up all around the projectiles in our territory. It'll just take a moment. Ivan turned to his communications monitor, which was showing a picture of a square projectile, or rather, what remained of a projectile. The casing was rusty and full of holes, while the warhead was lying to one side, significantly reduced in size. Ivan switched to another camera, then another, but the same thing was happening to all the projectiles. Now the screen showed an image of a man in military uniform. Hello, Ivan. You've seen it all by yourself now. What conclusions has the council come to? Asked Ivan. The council members have divided into groups and are currently in consultation. Our security forces are trying to work out supplementary measures to ensure the object's safety. I will thank you not to call my daughter an object. You're nervous, Ivan. This is not permissible under the circumstances. In 10 minutes, you'll be getting a visit from a panel of experts comprising prominent specialists, psychologists, biologists, radioelectronic engineers. They're already on their way. I want you to set up an interview for them with your daughter. Prepare her ahead of time. What opinion is the majority of the council inclined to favor? At the moment, they are leading towards totally isolating your family within the confines of your domain. You need to immediately remove all technical pictures from your daughter's sight. Stay close to her and try to follow her every move. Upon arriving at Ivan's domain, the panel of experts sent by the Russian Security Council engaged little Dasha in a lengthy conversation. After the child had been patiently answering all the adults' questions for about an hour and a half, everyone, including the observers, followed the interview on the huge video monitors at the Security Council's communication center, were suddenly thrown into a state of utter bewilderment when the door of Ivan's study opened and in walked Dasha's brother Kostya, carrying the cuckoo clock, which was now cuckooing incessantly. Kostya put the clock down on the table. The hands showed 11 o'clock, but no sooner had the mechanical bird given the requisite number of cuckoos than the big hand on the clock quickly traced a full circle around the clock face, and the cuckooing began all over again. Those present were amazed at this strange operation of the clock, alternating their silent gaze between the clock and Dasha. "Oh," all at once Dasha exclaimed. "I quite forgot. I have to go on a very important errand. That's my friend Verunka. turning the clock hands. That was our arrangement, just in case I forgot. I have to go. Footnote, pronounced Verunka, diminutive of the name Vera. 2 guards blocked the door of the study. What might you have forgotten, Dashenka? Ivan asked his daughter. I might have forgotten to go to the domain where my friend Verunka lives and stroke her little flower and water it. It really misses being caressed. It loves people to look at it tenderly. But it is not your flower, observed Ivan. Why can't your friend stroke it herself, her own flower? Paposhka, you see, Verunka's gone visiting with her parents. Where has she gone visiting to? Somewhere in Siberia. From all around the room, whispered exclamations could be heard. She's not alone. What kind of abilities does her friend have? She's not alone. How many of them are there? How can we tell who they are? We need to take measures immediately regarding every child like that. But all the exclaiming ceased directly. An elder, gray-haired gentleman rose from his seat at the side of the room. This man had the most senior title and position of all, and not just in relation to those present in Ivan's study. He was the chairman of the Russian Security Council. Everybody turned to him in reverent silence. The elder fellow looked at Dasha, sitting in her little wooden chair, and a tear rolled down his cheek. Then he slowly went over to Dasha and knelt down on one knee in front of her, holding out his hand to her. Dasha rose and took a step to one side. Holding the frilled hem of her dress, she made a curtsy and put her little hand in his huge palm. The elderly man looked at her for some time. Then, bowing his head, he kissed Dasha's hand in respect, saying, "Please forgive us, little goddess." "My name is Dasha," the girl answered. "Yes, of course, your name is Dasha. Tell us, Dasha, what will prevail on our earth?" The little girl looked into the elderly man's face in surprise, bent closer to him, and with the palm of her hand carefully wiped away the tear from his cheek, then touched his mustache with her finger. Then she turned to her brother and said, "Kostyenka, you also promised to help me talk with the lilies on Veronica's pond. Remember you promised?" "I do remember," Kostya replied. "Then let's go." "Let's go." In the doorway, having already passed by the guards, which had stepped aside as she approached, Dasha turned in the direction of the elderly fellow, still standing on one knee, smiled at him, and stated confidently, "On the earth shall prevail good. Good shall prevail." 6 hours later, speaking before an expanded session of Russia's Security Council, the elderly chairman said, "Everything in the world is relative. Relative to our generation, those in the new generation may seem to us to be like gods. It is not up to them to align themselves with us, but for us to align ourselves with them. The entire military might of the planet, with its unique technological achievements, has proved itself powerless before a single little girl of the new generation. And our job, our duty, our obligation is to the new generation. Oh my God, I can't read with her shit today. And our job, our duty, our obligation to the new generation is simply to clear away the garbage. We must make every effort to rid the earth of any kind of armaments. Our technological achievements and discoveries, embodied in the most modern and, it seemed to us, unique military complexes, proved nothing more than useless scrap in the face of the new generation. And we must clear it away."